Welcome, everybody. I'm Sejal Thakkar, your host for this exclusive Nobody Studios Culture Livestream show. And on this show, I have the privilege of meeting incredible individuals, some of our nobodies who have chosen to be a part of our journey. And with each guest, I get to talk to them about their experiences, their passions, and the profound impact that they're having on the world. And today, I'm incredibly thrilled for this episode because not only am I a huge fan of our guests' work personally, but also professionally. I've known Susan Miller for several years now, and she's just making an incredible, profound impact on this world. And so welcome to the show, Susan. I'm so excited you're here.
Yay.
Yay. I know. I've been looking forward to this conversation really. When I was preparing for our conversation yesterday, and I was just thinking about how long I've known you and just our connection on LinkedIn and how we've been supporting each other. I was just really excited about this because I look at this live stream as an opportunity to showcase, the people that are part of Nobody Studios' journey, but also to showcase the work that you're doing. So Susan, for those of you that don't know Susan that are joining us today, Susan is a values, culture, and partnership consultant. She's also an author and a poet. And so she's got a rich background on spanning supply chain, product, partnership management. And she's dedicated her life to helping individuals and teams rediscover their clarity of purpose, values, and and how they can achieve success, living according to those values. And so, again, her work is nothing short of inspirational. And the other thing I want to just mention for everybody else is she's got a little unique twist to her because she blends her professional expertise with her poetic and creative soul, which sets her apart, from other people that might be doing this work. So, Susan, I was just wondering if, one of the things that as I was preparing yesterday, I know one of your mantras is know your value, live your values. And I would just love to start off with that. What does that mean for you?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's been just an honor to know you for the years on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And anything you ask me to do, I'm like all in because it's amazing. And you ask me about my very favorite thing in the world, which is know your value, live your values. Starts when you're really young. Like before we know better, we know our value. We live our values because we don't know any better. We just are who we are, right? And then along the way, society kind of muddles. We get out into the real world, and especially in middle school. I think most people get muddled and they start trying to be something or do something, and they kind of lose track. They lose track of like, who am I and why am I here and what do I care about? Because, that conflict arises within us. So, to know your value, when you're in conflict, it's one of two things or both. You're in a conflict situation and you feel really unhappy and you don't know why. I would say either you feel you're not being valued. You're in a situation where you're not being seen, heard, understood. You don't feel valued, and or you're in conflict with your values. A lot of people don't even know what their values are. They can't necessarily name them, but when the line's being crossed. You know that there are certain things that you really care about. And, if you really care about compassion and you see people being squashed, that's really hard to live with, right? So that would be a value that, would be in conflict. So I know for me, when I'm in a situation where there's authenticity, compassion, and respect present, I'll pretty much be in a good, joyful place. But if those lines are crossed, is that really where I want to be? So I want others to recognize that first you have to know your value. You're already worthy. Like you don't have to try. You don't have to prove yourself. You're already there. And then recognize your values. Understand when you feel joy and when you don't feel joy and kind of look and see what's present and what's missing. Because when you can recognize and embrace those, then you can start making choices that are in alignment and, let's live a more fulfilling life, right?
Yeah, no, that deeply resonates with me, Susan, and you know that. But I agree with everything you just said. It starts with that self-awareness
Mm-hmm.
and authenticity. And I agree. I think when we understand our own worth, right, and we stay true to our own values, that's where we can lead that purposeful life and make the impact that we want. And I'll be the first one to admit, I didn't know what my values were until my son was born. I think inherently I'm a good person and I try to do good in the world, but I didn't have those sort of, I like to call them now those non-negotiable values in place, where now I have those filters where I run every decision through those non-negotiable values. And it just makes life a lot easier, right? Because then you're not caught up in the weeds. You know what's important, what's making you feel good, what's bringing that internal joy. And so I would love for you to share a little bit more about your personal journey, because I know your story. We've talked several times, but I would love for everyone to get to know you a little bit more. And what is your personal journey? And specifically, I would love for you to share kind of how you became passionate about workplace culture and bringing this to teams. What kind of got you there? If there was maybe a pivotal moment you can share with people so that we get to know you more.
Definitely. Okay. Well, the personal side, youngest of 6 kids, mother of 4. Family is intrinsically valuable to me. It's like part of who I am and who all of us are, right? It's part of our natural culture. But my pivotal moment for me was in 2019. I have worked in major companies, startups, nonprofits, volunteer things. But in 2019, I attended 3 conferences in a row, and one was an HR technology conference, one was and then the other 2 were entrepreneurial conferences. And when I was there, it just hit me. Like, I knew those times when I was in a good culture and how I felt as a team and as an individual, but I also knew those experiences that were not. And I'm sitting there and they're talking about all these things, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I have to write this article. Now, I did not consider myself a writer. I'd never written anything other than what was needed for school or for a work thing. So I was like compelled, like I have to write this and I have to publish it on LinkedIn. I wasn't even active on LinkedIn. I was like dabbling on LinkedIn. And I wrote this article, and out of the woodwork, people that I had never heard from before started responding, and like they got it. They understood. And I'm like, this is something that really, really matters. People matter. And I can make a difference because I've worked in teams where we've done both, where I've experienced both. And I know how to make it, I know how to listen to the people in a way where their voices are heard and, integrate that with the team. And like, that's where it started. And it's been wild ever since.
Well, I mean, listening, listen to people in a way that makes them feel heard and seen. That skill alone could resolve a lot of issues that we see happening in organizations, right? And so you've got a lot of fans joining us today, Susan. Look at this. You've got Doug Miller, who said very excited for today's discussion. Patrick Tinney said greetings from Canada. Welcome, Patrick. Carmen West, agree with you, Susan. And we've got Christine Paso, another incredible human being. And she said that knowing our non-negotiables shows our value to others and ourselves. I love that. And so, one of the things that I love about doing this live stream is really talking to people about what drew them to the Nobody Studios journey, because we're doing some pretty cool stuff. And some people hear about what we're, they hear about our big mission of building 100 companies in 5 years, and they're like, they go the other way. And then there's other people that hear it and they're like, sign me up. I want to be a part of this, right? And so I would love to know from you, what inspired you to join the Nobody Studios journey and become an investor and a supporter of everything that we're doing?
Well, look in the mirror there, Sejal, because ever since I met you, I met you and I actually went and looked back up to see the exact title. It was the Undoing Racism Alliance call in January 14th, 2021. And it was such a powerful call at a powerful time in our lives. And everything that you've asked me to do along the way, like when I did a meditation with you, I've done other things with you, I've read your content, I know how passionate you are. So when you put a call out and you said, hey, check out this company. Now, once again, I wasn't a writer before, I wasn't an investor before. And I looked and I said, Nobody Studios, first off, love the name. I mean, I want to be a nobody, right?
We're all nobodies, right?
We are. Like, I loved it. And I was like, I want to be a nobody because I believe that the little guys, the people with the passion and the dreams and the beliefs, they can make things happen. Each one of us can make something happen. So I thought, I'm giving it a whirl.
I'm so glad you did. And, I love that because one of the reasons why I was drawn to Nobody Studios, there's a lot of different reasons. And as I've been, with the organization now for almost 3 years, it's like more and more, I get more and more reasons. But one of the initial reasons when I spoke with Mark and how he told me about how we were going to do the equity crowdfunding campaign, to give people who are not accredited investors, who don't have like hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in their bank account like me, and I never was an investor either. And so, but to open it up and to give everybody an opportunity to become an investor in the studio, and it doesn't matter how much money you put into the studio, as far as I'm concerned, but it really matters is that we have all these incredible humans like yourself that are part of this journey that, we can turn to for support, and one of the things that you said in our preparations when we were going back and forth really resonated with me. And I posted about this yesterday on LinkedIn when I was preparing, is you said everybody is a nobody and a somebody. Embrace it. So I would love to, I know I've got my interpretation of that statement and I posted about that yesterday, but what did you mean when you wrote that in that email to me?
We are all a hero, a villain, a fly on the wall, or not even like on somebody's radar. And it's okay. Like, we can be nobody to one person and somebody to somebody else. We're going to have a lot of different stories, right? So stop trying and start being. Be that nobody. Be the nobody who makes a difference. And then turn that into a somebody, right? Put your energy and passion into it. And if you work in your passion and you do what you really believe, you're going to be a somebody, at least in that, right? And we don't have to, there are somebodies out there, and that's a whole story for another day, who still feel like nobody. And they've made it. They're multi-billionaires and they're still trying so hard. And then there's others who go their whole life as nobodies to the world. And, look at like Vincent van Gogh, right? It was after he died that he became so famous. So it's not about the fame and fortune. It's about the passion. And if each of us did our little piece, we would make a huge difference. And we can. It's the little things.
So true. I mean, everything. I love that. And I did a few weeks ago, I do another live stream with our CEO, Mark McNally, and another one of the CEOs for Ovations, the platform that we created out of Nobody Studios called Ovations. And it goes right to what you're saying, because I asked him the question, I go, how is this platform different than any of the other platforms that are out there? And his response was, well, because we actively promote the people on our platform, because there's people that are making tons of money. There are speakers that, but there's a lot of people that aren't making that kind of money, but they have important stories like we do to share with the world. And we want to create a platform where we could promote these people and get them to share their stories. And I think that's really what it comes down to at the studio. It's this idea of we're all different. And we all have unique ways we can contribute. What you bring to the table with and I want to get into a little bit more about the work that you're doing, but what you bring to the table versus what I bring to the table are totally different things, but they're very important to culture and organizations, right? So I love what you said. So let's dive a little bit more. So you've written a chapter in a book, and it's called Team Impact, Bridging Culture, Full Team Ahead. And you talk about in that chapter, how to maximize team impact. And specifically, you're focusing on the context of multi-generational and multicultural workforces. That really got my attention because, as you know, at Nobody Studios, we're global. We plan on having a footprint globally. And just from that equity crowdfunding campaign, we got 1,000 new Nobodies across the globe, right? So we're working with teams that are located in different time zones, different cultures, different languages. So I'm really interested in learning from you right now. What are some practical strategies that we should keep in mind, especially for organizations like ours, in maximizing our team impact? Because obviously that's a huge thing for us. And so give us some practical tips that I can learn from, that our Nobody Studios leaders can learn from, and anybody else that's looking at building an organization with global teams.
And it is the most exciting time right now because we have 5 generations in the workforce.
That's
which
right.
is like crazy cool. And with technology and the global footprint between our clients and our employees. So technology has enabled us to have this. And so let's not fight it. Let's embrace it, right? Basic things we can do. I mean, it really starts at the foundation, and I'm sure you've heard this and felt this before, but leaders, simplify. Are you who you say you are? Are you doing what you say you're going to do? And are you sharing that and listening to your employees? Are you communicating? And it's not a one-directional communication. It's a bi-directional communication. Are they hearing and understanding? You have a vision. You have a mission, right? Is it being understood? Is it simple enough? Or is it foofy and fancy? And are we trying to make it sound more than what it is? Are we picking values that are popular right now? Or are we picking values that really matter? And then are we working with our team on that whole understanding of hey, when this line gets crossed, we will say no. We will turn down a client if these values are crossed. And a lot of people are like, what? No, you don't turn down clients. Well, guess what? You want to have partnerships and clients and employees, and it all needs to flow together. And values really matter. Now, you have to have those core, and then there's the pillar values. But the core values, people need to know without having to look it up, right?
Yeah.
And they can make decisions. They can make decisions if they understand what the mission, the vision, and the values are, but they have to understand it at a core level. So that's
So are you able to share maybe an example of a company that you've worked with, and kind of walk us through what that process looks like, right? So for example, if we were going to bring you in at Nobody Studios, right? And we've done a couple of workshops. We had another incredible human being, Blaine Bartlett. Shout out to Blaine Bartlett. He's worked with our leadership team. Susan, if you don't know Blaine, I'll have to introduce you to him. He's phenomenal. But he worked with our leadership team. Last year, he did a workshop with our team, and we did another workshop with him to really kind of get to the base of what our core values are. And we've done some work since then. But let's say we were going to bring you in, right, at the studio to help us and get clear on what our core values is. What does that process look like? Or if anybody we've got a lot of people signing in, if they want to bring you in, what is sort of the process they can expect to be working with you? And maybe you could share a story of an organization you've worked with before and how that turned out.
Yeah, I'm going to start with a story because I think that it's probably easier to get that way. So, of course, I also work in the breast cancer space.
Yes.
And when I started working, it began with a friend who unfortunately, she has stage 4 breast cancer. And her breast cancer was found 2 months after an all clear mammogram and ultrasound. So she was like, I don't want my story, her mantra, so my story doesn't become your story, right? Now she wrote a book, she was doing great things, but mostly on a small local level. And she's like, Susan, I need to make a difference. This needs to happen. And so I don't do everything. I will bring in the partners as needed at the points that we need them, right? And that's why I'm also a partnerships consultant. But the first thing is really clarifying what are you doing and why? Because and people say, yeah, to start with why. That's a very popular book. It's really important. Start with why. You really have to understand the core of why you're doing what you're doing. And what is the end game? If you achieve, so your vision is really in the end, if I achieve this, will go away, right? And that's, I mean, that's for her particular, that was what we chose. So, we first focused on the vision statement and the mission of like, what is it she wants to achieve so that breast density no longer inhibits the finding early breast cancer detection, right? And then we're like, okay, so how are we going to do that? And we really dove deep on what was happening in the market, what gaps were missing, and then how were we uniquely positioned to make a difference. And we recognized there was a gap, empowering women to understand, find out their breast density, learn their options, and then advocate for themselves. So now we got the mission, we got the vision. Well, the values, what are we, what do we have to achieve? We bring in the members of the team and what can't be crossed. And for each thing that we wanted to do, we brought in my friend Evan. He came in and he helped us. He helped create this value crest, which now I work with him on. We did a brand culture compass. We bring in people to help with the marketing when we need help with that. But it's identifying the right team at the right time and valuing their skills to come in and help, and knowing when it's something we can do or when it's something we need to partner on and to do. Likewise, if I go back as an employee in the manufacturing space, it was the same thing. It was working within the team and understanding what each person was bringing to the party, right? So, I mean, that's a whole story unto itself.
Yeah, no, but that you make such an important point, is that you got to have that open dialogue though, and get to that mutual understanding, which, let's be honest, it's not always an easy conversation to have, right? Especially when you've got like, senior level leaders that have been doing this a long time, right? And you've got egos in the room, and you've got people in the room, and then you got to bring everybody to that shared understanding.
Yeah.
Right. So what are some ways that you do that though? I'm curious, because I know I have my ways of how do I get people on the same page, but I would love to hear from you of how do you get people on the same page when you've got people who think differently and maybe have a different perspective on, let's say, a core value. Let's pick one, right? So one of our core values is we talk about transparency a lot at the studio. Right now, you can interpret that. Different leaders can interpret transparency differently. So how do we get everybody on the same page? What are some of the methods you use to getting people on the same page to get to that shared understanding?
Yeah, well, it's understanding, once again, going back to why. Why is transparency so important to us? Because if everybody understands why it matters, right? So working with a team, why does transparency matter? They need to understand what's happening and why, like I think about Japan. I'm going to go back to a Japan instance.
Yeah.
They needed to change things. The thing was, you usually, as a supply chain manager, you walk out and you say, you've got to make all these changes, right? But when I explained to them that, you got to work third shift, you're going to have to, do everything you're going to have to do. And the team was like, it's an us against them. And, I was working across all levels, right? From the receiving deck to the manufacturing floor to the head of manufacturing and the head of engineering and everything else, right? You have to represent the team with full transparency. So when you walk out to the factory floor and you say, we're changing everything that we're doing right now, and this is why, and you bring them on board with the customer in mind, and this is why we have to do this for our customer, a $3.5 billion customer, by the way, but this is why, and you're part of it. And you take people off of the pedestals and the prisons, right? If it goes well, we won. If it fails, we failed. But we're not going to let it fail, because we're going to open up the door to communication to understand what stands in our way. It's not an us versus them. So they have full accountability. I have accountability for what I'm doing. And when I walk back to the head of the division and say that we can do this, I know I have the buy-in from the team because we discussed it. They told me, well, there's a supply chain issue. Oh, that's me. Oh, we can't work third shift. So you go through all the different elements and you do it as a team. And that's from the you can't get the box in the door. I'll go out in the receiving dock and I'll help you, to going all the way to the top. And you know what? Sometimes you got to say no. You got to say, you know what? We cannot deliver 100 of this week. I can do 58 this week and 142 next week. Is that okay? Yep. So the transparency is about that, opening that communication and really understanding what's standing in the way.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I to get that buy-in from top to bottom. I love that you highlighted that because I think that's very important when you're, when I work with clients, to say, I understand that maybe the senior leaders have a shared understanding of what they mean by, if we're again talking about transparency, but like you said, does the person on the front line, when we're saying this core value applies to that person, what do they think of when they think of transparency? So I love everything you said. It's about getting that buy-in from everybody and defining that core value clearly and communicating that to everybody so that they can use that as a filter in the decisions they're making, right?
And we'll do workshops and exercises that help, bring out, we'll talk about the different values and what does it mean to you, right? Because everyone has a different definition and it's not one definition. We all have what it means to us. But as soon as you can connect it on a personal level, you might not even agree, right? I mean, I look at like me as a parent. I tell my kids, you need to do something. I don't say you have to do this. I say, this is what you need to do and why. And why.
Yeah.
And have that bi-directional communication, even when they were little, I don't want to make my bed. Well, this is why we need to make our bed. And this is why you need to eat your vegetables. But this is why. It helps with the decisions. So on a values perspective, you don't just walk out to the team and say, our values are like mine, authenticity, compassion, respect. You say, this is why we believe it. What does it mean to you? And what value, and not just what we think, what values are important to you and why? Because we don't want to cross your lines either, but like, let's blend those values and have a better understanding.
Yeah. And of course, as you scale, as you grow and you adding on people, right? That's always a concern at the studio. When we looked at our values last year, the people that were in the room came to that shared understanding of here's what we do understand, here's what we don't understand. And then we move forward. But then when we did the workshop this year, and now we had more people in the room, we have to, again, bring those people into the conversation. And one of the techniques that Blaine Bartlett shared with our team that I love, and I'm always trying to do this as often as I can, is, he said that when he was working with one of his clients, every single meeting that they would have, they would start off that meeting. I think it was Nokia that he was working with. And he said every single meeting that they would have, they would start off and allocate a set time at the beginning of every meeting where they would talk about their core values, and they would talk about where they talk about examples, where somebody would go around and say, okay, here's an example of how we aligned behavior with the core value, or we made a decision with our core value in mind. But then he said they would also talk about where they missed the mark.
Yes.
Right. And that's so important, I think, to this entire process, is that you're not always going to be, 100% of the time aligned with your core value. That's sort of your guiding star, but you need to be aware of when you're missing that mark so that you can work towards getting closer to that. So I don't know if you want to share any thoughts on that, what he was doing with his client, but I love that. I love just having those conversations openly.
Oh yeah, and that's where, and when we're helping create like a brand, we call it a brand culture compass,
Uh-huh.
where you literally will make decisions in the different
I
areas.
love that, by the way. I
Yes.
love that.
Yeah, because
What is that? What is it? So it's a compass. And
it's
tell
a
me a little bit
compass.
about, yeah,
Oh, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing because you
I
can
want to,
use your compass. You create your brand pillar. You have your brand, your core values, and then you have your pillars. And then it helps you make decisions. But in creating that process, and you can do this for a company as a whole, you can do it for a department, you can do it for a product or even a sales goal plan. Like if you're not meeting your goals, like maybe you need to come back in and look at your mission, your vision for your goal, and then look at
yes,
those things. But in terms
brilliant.
of the values, yeah, what values are present when you're
Hmm.
successful? What values are missing when you're missing the mark? What values, what's not being achieved? We'll talk to the whole team about we tie it in with the mission, vision, values, but then we get into what theirs are. And then we talk about what's important to make things happen. So
I want to learn
including
more about that compass. The compass, we're going to take that conversation definitely offline because I want to explore how we can do that at the studio and what that really looks like. That's awesome. So Susan, I know we're at time and I knew that this was always going to happen, of course, with us. I always love spending time with you. So, but I want to end with just one more question. You've been a supporter of the studio. I'm a supporter of your work. You've got a lot of different superpowers. You do a lot of different things, right? What are some ways that you might want to contribute more of your skills or your talent to helping our studio take our culture to the next level?
Thank you. So foundationally, especially because you're doing new companies, you've got to get the foundation right. It's just like building a building. You've got to get the foundation right. We're ending the year right now. There's things we can do right now. Fourth quarter. Are you making your numbers? What do you need to achieve? How do we get focused and clear? Simplify. I always say simplify, humanize, amplify, and then evangelize.
Mm,
So let's move through that. Fourth quarter, let's set the next first quarter goals, and then let's align it with the values and make sure that the team is really clear and
mm,
understands what you want to achieve and why, and so that they can be part of the solution.
mm.
So
I love that. I mean, that's like what you just said is like literally my tagline. You got to empower people to be part of the solution, right? So, all right. Well, this was such an incredible conversation. And what I'm taking away from it is that, look, cultural transformation is a journey, right? It's an ongoing journey and it starts with leadership, right? So leaders, as Susan said, you need to lead by example. You need to communicate your values consistently and engage all of your employees to be part of, as Susan just said, of the solution, right? And so you can reach out to Susan. She's on LinkedIn, right? Susan, what are some ways people, if they want to work with you and bring you in to help them with their organizations, what are some ways people can get a hold of you?
definitely LinkedIn. I'm on there a lot. And then my website is piecesofi.com.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you can't get me on LinkedIn, which you can,
Awesome.
then I
Yeah.
would.
Susan, and if you're on LinkedIn, you got to connect with her because she puts on incredible, inspiring, positive content, which we need more of. So thank you again, Susan, for joining me today, for sharing such valuable insights with all of us. It's been an inspiring conversation. I've learned a lot from you about some things that I can take back to the studio and would love to continue talking to you more about how we can have you help me a little bit more with some of the stuff that I'm working on. And for all of you that were joining us today, again, you've got some more fans here. Look at that. You've got, Eben here, Tobias Green. And I'm going to put this up what he said. He said, why equals purpose, how equals core values, what equals the brand, right? And this is perfect what he's talking about. A brand culture compass guides our internal decisions. It unifies the external messages and ensures brand authenticity. So you've got IPIC joining. Hey, IPIC Williamson. She said, love you both. You empower powerhouses. I love IPIC. Christine, thank you everybody for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you again, Susan.
Thank you so much, Sejal. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for coming.